Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Small Talk with Shibby, my LCS post-game interview content. I'm joined by the very victorious 100 Thieves Doublelift. Doublelift, I want to get into it. It seems like you guys have finally kind of found your footing. You guys are starting to gain that momentum. It feels like, you know, your team as a whole is really starting to kind of really figure out who they are. Where do you kind of put that credit towards? Is it the players? Is it the coaches? Is it Nuke Duck, right? Like, is it a combination of everything? How has your team been able to kind of, tighten things up and really start to get going as we push towards this last couple of weeks of LCS?
Yeah, well, we were pretty unlucky in the sense that Quid
Yeah.
and Someday and Kane all came super delayed. So they came like one by one. First Someday showed up like right before the first week of LCS. So we barely had any practice with him. And we're still playing with Nuke Duck mid, obviously, in the first week. Then Quid comes. And then finally in week 3, Kane arrived. Just like, normal visa delays and problems with short turnarounds and stuff like that. But I always knew, it just sucks when you don't have your full team. I think you can kind of imagine that you feel like some problems may be fixed by the arrival of the full roster, and some problems might stay, and you're not really sure. You're kind of in limbo until that happens. So we weren't really able to improve on the right things, I guess, with our temporary roster. But now that everyone's here and our head coach is actually here, I feel like we can actually start off with the season basically. So I'm feeling really good. Our momentum is really good, but I think more importantly, we've had a lot of team talks about, the team's direction and how we want to be, what kind of team we want to be. And I don't want to share too much, I guess, but it kind of shows in our play that we want to be an aggressive and decisive team. And also flexible, not someone who is completely stuck to playing full scaling, playing full early game, playing in a certain style. Last split, I think we had a problem with, we just bandaged all of our problems by picking a very specific type of comp and playing only in one specific type of way. It's not going to work. That's not what a good team is supposed to do. Eventually you get red and the enemy team develops counters to your strats and drafts, and then it's just completely unplayable. So yeah, anyways, the short of it is that I think our team is finally online, and then the previous versions of 100 Thieves that you saw, weeks 1, 2, and 3 is kind of fake.
Let's dive into being a more flexible team, right? You've obviously been on a lot of rosters that have been very successful both domestically and have gone to the international level. How do you guys balance, especially in the current LCS split, how do you guys balance kind of preparing for the international, preparing to be a more flexible team, but also winning the games that need to be won, right? Like figuring out hey, here's what's going to work in the LCS, but we can't necessarily follow through with this at the international stage. How, through your tenured career, how have you seen the best way to kind of balance those two things, right? Because both are equally important. I think for you as well, in my opinion, you want to be successful internationally. You've had a lot of domestic success.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do. And usually they're about the same. If the question is what's the difference between prepping to face the best teams in the world and winning LCS, there is no real difference. I mean, yeah, you could be oh, LCS best of ones, you're prepping for a specific opponent or for a specific matchup in playoffs. Versus playing at Worlds, right? You have to play versus a wide variety of teams, different regions, different play styles. It is ultimately very similar. It is competing is really just about, are you getting better every day? Are your mechanics getting better? Is your understanding of your matchups getting better? Are you able to slowly edge out bad habits? Are you able to fully master certain aspects of the game so that you can do them with your eyes closed? And basically everyone is on this journey, right? But it's very easy to get sidetracked and stop fully focusing on being a better version of the player that you are today. I think the best teams, everyone is basically just doing the exact same thing. You're just trying to improve your play. If you can, imagine a chess player who can just visualize the game and play out all these different scenarios and know how something should work if both the teams are playing well. then you'll be a good player. But obviously, because like league changes so much and your teammates change, your place, the team's like preferred styles change, and like everything always gets shuffled. But I don't really ever see it as too different. And if you really think about like NA Worlds and stuff like that, how we measure up internationally, it's easy to get demoralized because our record is horrible. But it's just you take it one step at a time. That's all. That's all you can do.
I do want to kind of talk about obviously some of the more or I would younger or newer additions to your team. Obviously, Quid you mentioned has been ramping up really well, and he's kind of really found himself in the mid lane, right? He's actually like you mentioned, he's just like, oh, it's a total mid gap right at the end of this game. Do you think
Yep.
he was kind of a bit unfairly judged in his debut, right? Obviously, had a couple like missteps here. He misplayed on some important cooldowns and stuff like that, but has the progress Quid been making within scrims with the team, has that been like something that's been really, really crazy to see? Or when you saw this player, was it like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be like really good. Just give him like a week.
I mean, I always knew he was good. Like I always try to measure someone based on their average. Like what does their average game look like? And Quid's average game looks very good. Then he comes to LCS, and obviously it's his first time ever playing, like a real match, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's nervous, uncomfortable. We didn't really practice much with him when we played with him on stage, and he didn't even really scrim with us for the last like basically month beforehand. So, yeah, shitty situation to be in, and yeah, he didn't perform probably up to his standards. But the way he brushed it off was just so good. Like you should brush it off. Basically, you had a bad game, you need to move on and learn from it. And yeah, it's really easy for I could imagine it's really easy for an 18-year-old kid to move to the other side of the world and then have a bad debut and then like let that get to his head and affect his confidence and affect like the way he thinks about himself, which is just not going to be productive at all. So I really respect like his resilience, I guess, because if that was me, I'd be sweating, shaking, like massive anxiety all the time. But I think he was able to, yeah, just like toughen up from it and play at the level that like he really is at. So I know that his average game is it's just good. Like he's just a good player and he'll only get better. He's so young, and the way he thinks already, I can tell he's a very calculating person. So I expect good things out of him. Like I think maybe that's what people expected when Vikla came over, or maybe like what TSM thought like Ruby was gonna be. Like, well, let's import a Korean mid later, but these guys like didn't really show up and perform. I think Quid will definitely perform.
Let's kind of shift over the conversation to Busio, right? You've had a full split laning with him as your support. Obviously, he mentioned, I got to interview him not too long ago, and he mentioned that kind of his responsibilities as a support have kind of had to be increased, right? Because you obviously have lost Bjergsen in the mid lane. I know both of you guys, when teaming up on teams, have been a very, very vocal duo. Busio mentioned that he's kind of had to be more of that shot caller role. Have you kind of, in your own way, kind of, gone back a little bit on being the shot caller and kind of letting Busio take over? How is that? Because you're a veteran player, right? Like, obviously, you have your own ideas about the game. You want to think about it this way, but do you kind of let Busio dictate, like, hey, he sees this call, like perfect example, that Baron call where they saw Alistar bot, you forced Maokai out with his flash, and that Baron call that you mentioned, that was a really good call from him. How has that I guess passing the trust baton or passing that voice kind of been for you, right? Do you just kind of accept that, like, hey, this is the new norm, this is how it's going to be? Or do you feel like it's a little bit harder for you because obviously you have been playing for such a long time and have had a lot of success?
I actually greatly prefer when everyone is able to make the plan and I can follow and focus on my own game. There are times where everyone on the team steps up and makes good calls. I do think that in general, the support in general should dictate and narrate like mid game macro, which typically like, that's like a very generic thing to say. What it means is just what you're actually playing for between like after laning phase is over. So like what objective you want, how aggressively you want to play, like where you're putting vision down, how you want the side laners to like when you want the side laners to keep pushing or drop waves, basically to do something, to get something done, to invade a jungle camp, to contest vision, to look for an engage. I think these things typically it's done by the support in jungle because they're the most free on the map. They don't have to play like a flow charted game. So yeah, the short of it is basically I think I do a lot of the I think I do a good amount of shot calling, but I would not ever say that anyone is the main shot caller on the team. Um I think that everyone is able to bring their perspective and experience and like democratically like we will figure out what to do. And if you can't, then there's definitely a problem with the way that your team conducts reviews. Like basically if a team of 5 people can't figure out what to do in the game, then you're probably having completely unproductive reviews after scrims because no one is really learning anything if like there's 5 clueless players. So yeah, that's the way that I think about team building and just the way that a team should communicate. If somebody makes, for example, a bad call, I don't believe that because they've been labeled the main shot caller that everyone else should just follow blindly. That makes no sense to me. Everyone is fallible and able to make mistakes, making bad calls, and everyone is should be able on a team to make good things happen. So I have a lot of expectations of Busio. Basically, I feel like maybe playing with me, he's probably feel more pressured than he's ever felt in his entire life. But it's because I know that he can be a truly great player. You know, like I think that he can be better than I could ever be. He has so much potential. Busio is like, he could be something incredible. So yeah, I have a lot of expectations of him basically, and I pressure him a lot to like get to the next level, to always like just push himself, to just become a perfect player, basically, even though no one can really realistically do that. Um, and yeah, I think our progress has been very good. Between from where we started till now, I think we've both improved quite a lot.
I want to step out a little bit and talk about some comments that were recently made, specifically Berserker. Don't know if you had the time to look at what he said, but he said that LCS pros are complaining about solo queue quality. He's saying that essentially pros don't really have a right to complain because not all the LCS pros, not everybody's grinding solo queue 8 to 10 hours a day. Realistically, people are playing maybe 4 hours or less. Do you share the same sentiment as somebody that's seen a lot of success? Do you feel like you don't have to name names, of course, but do you feel like pros, do you think like his mentality and the way he views the North American solo queue and the North American pros or like LCS teams and pros is correct? Is that a correct point of view? Do you think it's kind of skewed because of just how hard he works and how successful his team is and maybe he sees what they're doing? Like, where do you kind of fall within all that?
The way that I fall is if there's a new patch and a new champion or a new build comes out, like for example, recently the static shift thing took over, right?
Yeah.
You need to play a ton of solo queue to figure out how good it does on every single pick. If you don't do that, then you're completely trolling. However, I do think that there is almost no mechanical value to playing solo queue. The main reason why you would play solo queue, right, on 50 ping, is not to improve your mechanics. In fact, I would argue that playing a lot of solo queue would be a huge detriment to your mechanics. You're actually learning the game, and your muscle memory will be messed up. We will literally have bad habits mechanically from playing too much solo queue. The main reason why you'd play it is to improve your game knowledge. You don't know how much damage a champion does at a certain item, like at a certain point in the game.
Yeah.
You don't
Break
know
points.
like many things like about how the game, like typically like flows. Then you need to sit there and put in the work, obviously. But the problem with NA has always been that like we can't really improve our mechanics from playing solo queue. I don't know if Berserker agrees with that. Maybe he thinks that you can. That's my opinion, and I think I'm a decent authority on having relatively good mechanics. Like it's not that Berserker's not. It's just like that's just been my experience. The more that I play, the worse that my muscle memory gets on playing on like the real game. The real game is played on 0 ping. That's the environment that we play in. So there is basically what I'm saying is there is times where you need to play a lot, and there's times where you need to watch a lot of VODs. My typical like routine involves watching my own replays quite a lot. I think that benefits me way more in terms of like getting good results than putting more solo queue practice in. But I do respect Berserker a lot for that mindset, and I think like it just feeds into this huge circle jerk. Basically on Reddit and Twitter, I didn't watch the interview or anything, but I'm sure that the comments are just like, man, yeah, he's so right. Like NA pros are just so lazy.
Probably. Probably.
And it's like, dude, you're actually like, I'm sure it's fun to say that, right? Like, I'm sure that it's very fun to say that the average NA pro is a paycheck stealer, and they don't actually really care about playing pro. They're just in it for the money, and they don't try hard. But basically, every single year, there's a smoking gun to your career. Like, you could literally just not have a job. So I think the average like pro does try pretty hard, because they know that if they don't, they're not gonna have a job next split. It's not that cushy where, you know, like, it's not like you're just infallible. You are replaceable at every moment of every step of your career. If you have like a few bad games, the community is gonna flame you. The guy who holds your contract is going to notice. You know, maybe next year, bye bye to your job. So I think people do put in a reasonable amount of work, even though it is fun to be like, haha, NA lazy. It's probably not that true. Are we as hardworking as Korea and China? No, but we're definitely not lazy.
Final question here, Doublelift. You've obviously had a very long career. You've had breaks within them where you've gone to streaming, you've gone pro, back to pro, gone streaming, back to pro. I feel like the mentality that you've had, and I think you've expressed it and you made comments on it before, is like, if you feel like you are better than maybe like the 10th best person or the 8th best AD carry, the 7th best AD carry, it feels like you always have this drive to play. Is there anything else that, you know, kind of keeps enticing you to come back to pro? Because it feels like you'll leave and then like the grass is greener on the other side, and then you'll look at pro play, you'll do the co-streams, I'll hear your comments, you're like, oh, I'm better than this guy. Like, what is this guy doing? Like, why is he playing this lane? Like, so on and so forth, right? Do you always kind of feel like you'll have that mentality even when you eventually, when that happens, do leave pro for good? Do you kind of think that, like, I'm not going to say ego, but mindset for you, where it's like, yeah, I could come back. Like, I'm like better than the 5th best ADC, 4th best ADC. Or is there something else that kind of is innately driving you consistently back to pro? Because you've had, I believe, 3 breaks now.
I've had 3 breaks. I took one in, I think it's 2. I took one in season 7, right?
TSM, yeah.
On TSM, and then I had a 2-year break. From like after TSM in 2020, I want to say. Yeah, it's like so hard to remember the exact like years, but it was after season 10. Both times I actually didn't intend on retiring. The first time I took a break, I was like basically going through a bit of a mental health crisis, and I was like a bit depressed. And I knew that I was just not going to be myself if I played. And then the second time, I didn't even want to retire. So I wanted to play very badly, actually. It was like this whole situation with like TSM, and I want to play Sword Art and blah blah blah. Basically, you know, it's all history now. But at no point in either of the times was I like, man, I really just want to go and do something else. I always had the drive to compete. It was just like, you know, circumstances, and I have the ability, right? Like, I always have the ability to go and stream, and I'm very grateful for that, honestly. So that I wasn't just like sitting and I'm being a bum and, you know, just doing nothing. I'm able to do this other thing. Maybe people think like, oh, he just like he really wanted to try this thing out, and it was more just a way for me to pass the time. But I'm not gonna say that, you know, like dispassionately be like, yeah, this is just like filler content until I can go back to playing pro. I'm gonna put in a lot of effort into streaming if that's what I'm doing. It's just like in the back of my mind, I knew I was always gonna play. So yeah, basically, I didn't ever really want to take a break, but it just happens. And when I finally do retire, of course I'm going to do it. There will come a day like League will not be around forever. That's just a fact. I mean, maybe Riot will just keep it going even when like no one, you know, the player base is like dwindled down to nothing. But like every game has its life cycle, and like I'm not crazy to think that like I'm gonna be playing pro when I'm like 45. So when that happens, I'll just put it down. Like, I don't really. It's just a game, you know. Like, it's just like one outlet for something that you can express yourself in, I guess. Like, if you're really competitive, you'll probably find like I'll probably find something else that I want to be competitive in. Just happens right now that I'm obsessed with League, so that's what I'm doing. Also, you know, I just got real lucky and I was able to be a pro player for a really long time. I was very, very grateful for that. But I'm not gonna be that like bitter old dude who's like 50 years old watching LCS and be like, damn, put me back in. Like, it's just a game, guys. Like, it's not that serious.
Hey, don't knock it, man. You could get old. You could become like Daigo Umehara, right? Super old and still, kind of, smashing tournaments and destroying, up and comers. But like I said, that was my final question. Doublelift. Do you have any final message to the fans that could be watching?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just thanks for all the fans sticking through. It has been like a really, really intense journey so far, like from the start of the year till now for everyone. But for me specifically, it's like when I started, I was like so uncertain about how I was going to perform. I had a lot of anxiety about like my personal performance because I was like, like the competition is very, very tough in LCS. Actually, the AD carries in LCS are very good. So I was a little bit worried because coming in, my skill level was like not great. 2 years not practicing, and then now I'm getting a lot of confidence because my process for getting better, and I think our team's process is very good. And I realize now that that's ultimately what matters the most, right? Like like good competitors in LCS, and they will come and go, but the way that we get better is ultimately like the only thing that matters, because at the end of the season, 3 teams go to Worlds. If you're sticking to your process the whole time and it was a good one, you'll probably make it. So very, very happy so far. I don't want to like jinx it or anything, but I think our team's on a great track, and thanks for all the support, guys. Sometimes I'll pop into the subreddit and stuff and like take a peek, and I think it's very positive. So I really appreciate that.